Hello, everyone. Welcome to Trail Talk today. I'm Edie here live at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center in Duncan, Oklahoma, and we have some special guests who are zooming in today from Seymour, Texas. It's Chris, and are you by yourself, Chris, or is Holly going to join you too?
Holly's gonna be my camera person today, so it'll just be me today on camera.
And so Holly's there, but she's behind the camera, and Chris is the man with all the information. Are you the executive director of the Whiteside Museum of Natural History, Chris?
Yes, ma'am. I'm the executive director, and I'm also the paleontologist for the museum.
Okay, awesome. So anyway, guys, this is a super interesting, I think it's going to be a super interesting episode of Trail Talk because, I mean, honestly, Chris, I just didn't realize that all of this dinosaur stuff was so close to where we live. I mean, I don't know. I just had no idea. So, first, tell me a little bit about yourself. Did you grow up in Texas, or how did you get to the Whiteside Museum?
So I was born and raised in Midland, Texas, and shortly after I was born, I moved to Europe. So I lived in Ireland and England for many years, and then I moved back to the United States and bounced between Louisiana and Texas a couple times. Ended up going to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in Louisiana. And shortly after that, I got my first museum job at the Museum of Natural History in Louisiana. And then I came through and I moved to Houston. And so in Houston, I got a job with the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And now I'm at the Whiteside Museum. And it's all because of my work with the Houston Museum of Natural Science that got me to where I am today here at the Whiteside Museum.
So was the Whiteside Museum kind of on your radar, like a place you really wanted to go someday?
That's kind of funny. So when I was with the Houston Museum of Natural Science, we had been coming up to Seymour to dig for fossils for our paleontology hall for quite a few years. And at the end of my time with the Houston Museum, Judge Clyde Whiteside, who was a Seymour native, wanted to open up a museum for the community of Seymour. And he had wanted to have a museum for Seymour his whole life. He was 90 when he passed away a couple of years ago, but he did manage to get the funds together and have this building purchased, and asked Houston Museum if they had anyone that could come up and consult to help develop this museum. And so my consulting position 9 years ago turned into a full-time thing. So I've been here ever since and helped develop the museum and bring it to where it is today.
So are you like the first executive director then?
I am, yeah, that's right. The very first executive director. That's a good point.
That's awesome. You're the OG then. That's
yeah.
Cool. So I was wondering how old the museum is. So it's 8-9 years old?
Yeah, we opened in 2014, and so now we are approaching our 9th anniversary here in June. So we're getting close.
Wow. So the exhibits, I mean, I looked through your website, which the website is very enticing. All the pictures and the videos and everything. I mean, it really, it's great. It really makes me want to come there for a visit. But yeah, so so you said you'd been going to Seymour to dig for these bones for a long time. Tell me about that. Like, how long have people been finding dinosaur bones there?
I'm gonna bring you guys actually into the museum to see this.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, so, historically, Seymour, Texas and north central Texas has been dug for fossils since about 1875. So in the scientific community, the fossils here have been well known for a very, very long time. Historically, since about 1875, none of the fossils here ever stayed here. They always left and went to museums like Harvard and Princeton and Yale. And And so the communities here never really had a chance to learn about the fossils from this area. It really wasn't until the Houston Museum of Natural Science and then now the Whiteside that all the research and digging that I do, the fossils stay here in Seymour for the first time, really, since fossil history began in Seymour about 1875. But the fossils that we find here are very, very special. And they look a lot like these guys right here, the big fin-backed animals called Dimetrodon.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I see that big fin on there. So how does that work exactly? Like you said, people have been coming there and digging bones since 1875. Do people, were they able to just gather what they wanted and take them, or was there like, was there any money involved in any of that? How does that work?
That's a great question. So back in 1875, it was a free-for-all. You know, this territory down here was very, very barren. There wasn't much here. Seymour really wasn't developed until 1885 or so, a little bit later. The Native Americans were still very much a presence in this area. Properties really were not owned by anybody in a lot of these areas. So in 1875, when a lot of these big museums in North America, the American Museum in New York and what would become the Field Museum in Chicago, between 5 and 1900, they were in a rush to go out to the middle of nowhere and collect as many fossils as they could to fill these museums very rapidly. So really, there was no ownership of the fossils until they came out here and dug them up. And for the most part, the paleontologists at these big museums would send these crews out to the middle of the wilderness for as little as a few dollars a month to bring back as many fossils as they could to help them fill their museums.
Right. Just like the labor, they just hired laborers to do all of that work for them. Is that what you mean?
Hired labor. Essentially, they would hire these guys to come out on horseback and try to find fossils for their museums.
Wow. I've actually been to the Field Museum in Chicago. Are any of those big dinosaurs they had there, did any of them come from around Seymour?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a section in the Field Museum that's the Permian section, and that's what the age of the fossils are here. About 290 million years old. In fact, these are not actually dinosaurs. They're about 40 to 50 million years older than the very first dinosaurs. They're some of the very first land-walking reptiles. But Chicago does have a good Permian section, and all of the fossils in the Permian section there, they're all from Seymour and Baylor County, this area.
Really? Wow. I guess I probably didn't even, I don't know if it says that.
No,
If they came from Seymour or not.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that a museum is only as good as the text panels that they have with the exhibits. You know, if the text panels are vibrant and enough to catch your attention, then people will remember them. Some museums, even the Field, have text panels that sometimes, if they're too small, you won't remember them. It's an interesting point that you made there.
Right. Well, they have some really huge, you know, the dinosaur bone things hanging from their ceiling. I'm sure you've been there.
Just about a month ago. That's right.
Yeah. It was very cool and just, you know, just so open and so big. It was really a fun experience to get to see those. So what made you where did your interest in paleontology, where did that come from?
So my dad was a geologist, and he worked in the oil industry for about 50 years. He just retired a couple of years ago, and I think it was his 47th year with Chevron.
Right.
And as a kid, that's where I learned to love geology and the rocks and the outdoors. And so instead of doing things like Little League and going to the movies, you know, I was going out into the middle of nowhere to dig up dinosaur bones.
So, like for real, or were you like pretending?
Oh, for real, absolutely. Yep. So we would go to South Texas when I was a kid and dig up fossils, and so I really learned everything from growing up with him. And so I tell everybody now that I blame my dad on all my problems. You know, that's all.
That's a great line. So, did you like collect all the fossils and everything that you found? I mean, do you have like a personal collection?
As a kid, I used to love to collect, and I would say through my high school, I would always have a wonderful closet full of fossils. And when I started to get into college and into the museum industry, I really started to grow to respect what museums meant and keeping collections. So ultimately, all my fossils came to the museums that I worked at, and so I don't have a personal collection now. The majority of everything that I find is all in the museum.
So not very long ago, we were at the Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that I noticed is that they have a lot of, I don't know, molds of bones. They didn't have a lot of real dinosaur bones. You know what I mean? I mean, they have some, but most of them are like a model.
Oh, yep.
And so is the Whiteside Museum like that, or do you guys have the real deal going on there?
I'm going to show you. We have the real deal. Come on this way here.
Hey, I love this. I'm so excited.
Okay. So behind me there, and I think Holly can capture most of it. So this is a Dimetrodon skeleton. This is the big reptile with the sail on his back. So that's the real skeleton, Bonnie the Dimetrodon. And so skeletons that we dig up in Seymour, we preserve them as we have found them. So is laying exactly how we found the skeleton in the ground. And we were able to capture the entire block of dirt and put it on display so that you can see how it was laying in the ground. A lot of museums do use casts because it's often very difficult to put fossils together and mount them in a safe position so that it can be viewed. Also don't do their own collecting. So a lot of museums essentially don't have paleontology departments that go out to the field and find fossils for their museums. And it's easier now these days and cheaper to simply purchase the cast for your exhibits. About the Whiteside is that all of our dig sites are literally 10 minutes down the road. So we can be out of the dig site every single day of the year if we wanted to, and bring those fossils right to the museum and do all the work in the lab here and put them on display. So our favorite.
Still digging dinosaurs now, dinosaur bones.
Say that again?
You are still digging up dinosaur bones, like currently?
As of 2 hours ago, I was.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That is so awesome. So people have been digging bones out there since 1875. So what is that? 145 years, 47 years? And how much longer do you think you guys are going to be finding things?
Yeah, the beauty of it for the dig site that I'm working, it's a pretty historical site that was first discovered in about 1910. And in the Smithsonian at the DC Museum, there's a beautiful Dimetrodon skeleton. And it looks a lot like this. And it's the same quarry that I'm working on right now in 1910. So it's the quarry itself is very prolific in terms of how many fossils are there. It's the lower Permian vertebrate bone bed in the entire world. And again, if you go to any museum in the world and you see fossils that are Permian of age, Dimetrodon and things like that, there's a 99% chance it came from the quarry that's right here in Seymour. But to answer your question, my generation won't see the end of these fossils. The nice thing is that this, what we call bone bed, is so extensive that the next generation will be picking up where we left off.
Really? Wow. So what happened to make all these? And you said these are pre-dinosaur. Is that what you said? They were the pre.
Yeah, so these animals existed about 50 to 60 million years before what we would consider a true dinosaur. So things like Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops. These animals much later. So the fossils that we find here are some of the most primitive reptiles and amphibians on the planet. And these are also the very first reptiles to become dominant on land. So this is a really interesting aspect, is that the conquest for land, being able to leave the water and stay permanently out of the water and live on land, that transition occurred really closely to Seymour. One of the best records on the planet to see that is here. So these very primitive reptiles are learning to live and walk on land for the very first time. And that's what we're studying here in Seymour.
So the thing that, are they smaller than, like you said, Tyrannosaurus Rex,
Yeah, that's right.
Smaller, because this one you're standing there now, and the other one, the fin back one that you showed me earlier, those seem to be smaller.
Yeah, that's right. I stand next to this Dimetrodon skeleton. This is as big as the biggest animal on the planet right now, 290 million years ago. So this guy's about 10 feet long, and that's about as big as the animals are in the Permian. So they get bigger, essentially bigger animals for another 40 to 50 million years. So this is the apex of size for how big animals could get back then, and dominant carnivores on the planet. But things were not as big during the Permian. And it really wasn't until the Triassic and Jurassic and Cretaceous, which are the true dinosaur ages, starting years down the road, that's when we see an explosion in size. But we don't see size explosion right now because these are very early in the history of reptiles and amphibians. So essentially things like this are learning to walk and live on land for the very first time. So it's going to take a long time for these animals to get adjusted to this transition of once being an aquatically dominant animal to things that are living on land. There's a lot of trial and error, so to speak, in the ecosystems for the next 40 million years.
And so were these plant-eating animals, or?
Yeah, so 99% of all the animals that we have on the planet in the Permian where we're digging are carnivores. Almost everybody is a carnivore. There's eating animals, not very many, but again, this is a huge transition from animals that are living on water to learning to live on land permanently for the very first time. So there are a few animals that are starting to transition from meat eating to plant eating. And so we'll go over here and we'll show you the very first plant eater. This is what's really fun too.
Yeah.
So this is another big fin-backed animal, very similar to Dimetrodon. But he is called a Daphosaurus. And so he's got a big sail on his back too, but he's got prongs or branches that stick out the side of his sail. And so this is one of the very first land dominant plant eaters. And so he's got these little prongs or branches because he likes to blend in with the sticks and the trees in the forest. So you can imagine these animals were trying to look like the trees so that Dimetrodon wouldn't eat them for lunch.
Smart. So how can you tell the plant eater from the meat eater?
Yeah, that's a great question. So always the easiest way is often to look at the teeth. So meat eaters are going to have very sharp teeth, and plant eaters are going to have much duller molar-like teeth that are used to grind up vegetation. So that's one of the first things. The second thing is you look at the rib cage. So the ribs of an animal can tell you a lot. So for an animal that eats plants, if we look at our biggest plant eaters here in Texas and southern Oklahoma and Oklahoma, you look at the cows and longhorns, they have really wide rib cages. They look like bows. So those go out. And so animals that eat vegetation have to constantly eat plant matter because it digests so quickly. So that's why they're constantly eating. So animals like Daphosaurus, they have bow-shaped ribs as well, that their guts essentially stick out very wide. And so that's another indicator that they would have a huge gastrointestinal system to be able to pack in the vegetation.
Did they have multiple stomachs like cows do?
No, that's interesting. So that's a mammal thing. That really is that probably didn't arrive for another 150 to 200 million years. Animals with double stomachs is a relatively new thing for animals, speaking. But pretty much everything on the planet that was that consumed material would have a single stomach. It's a primitive feature that's lasted since 500 million years ago. But it's a great, that's something that Mother Nature developed much later.
Okay. So if I came to the museum, the Whiteside Museum, I'm specifying because I'm at another museum right now. But if I came down to Seymour to that museum, tell me what kind of experience would I have? What would that look like for me?
You'd have an awesome one. Say
Oh,
that.
sure. Yeah. Like this is on my list of things to do in the near future.
Really proud of this museum because of the paleontological history, and also because we have the opportunity to preserve it. And then, of course, we have the opportunity to share it with the rest of the world. And it's something that you can physically see and touch. We have some of the original fossil skeletons that we've dug up actually mounted in these exhibits. So there's two more of our big Dimetrodon skeletons. Exhibits with the actual teeth and the jaws of these animals. Some of the very first land dominant carnivores, and you can actually get really close to these skulls and see those teeth. And we'll go this way real quick and we'll show you some of the other things. So we even have some skeletons that we haven't perfectly prepared yet because we want to show what they look like in the ground. And so one here is called Carlos the Dimetrodon, and you can see his skeleton still has a lot of dirt on it. And so we left it just as is, but you can see all the beautiful fin spines and the ribs and everything. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the processes are when you're actually preparing fossils. And then, of course, for the true dinosaur lovers, we've got some of the very true dinosaurs of Texas. And everybody will recognize Triceratops. And this is something that is a cast. So this is one that the original skull weighs close to 5,000 pounds. So this skull would not be able to be on display. And so when you go into a museum, you see Triceratops, there's a lot of times that it's a cast. Triceratops was found in Texas, especially in the southern part of Texas where the rocks are a little bit younger. So Triceratops is only 65 million years old compared to 290 million years, that we find fossils here. And of course, we've got everybody's favorite, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And so we've got a skull of a T-Rex there. And we've also got a model of what a T-Rex would have looked like if he had feathers all over his skull. We know that T-Rexes and all dinosaurs actually had feathers all over their bodies because they're very closely related to birds. And so this is one of the most of a T-Rex with feathers on his skull. And then, of course, Pachycephalosaurus is probably every kid's favorite. Every second grader that comes in here actually knows how to say Pachycephalosaurus.
Right, yeah.
We dinosaur things too to show those relationships between the old animals that were here and the younger ones were in Texas too, but much later. So the paleontology aspect of it is a big feature for the museum, that you can get right up close to these animals and see what they looked like. And we have a lot more wings in this museum that we were more than happy to walk you through. We have a zooseum, so we have live animals that have lizards and things like that, because we like to show the relationships between modern animals and the ones that we dig up right here. A modern animals of Texas room with essentially taxidermy of a lot of the animals that you see here in this part of the world, longhorns and things like that. And then our big exhibit is the fossil preparation lab, which is where we actually bring all the fossils into the museum to do the research. And I'm more than happy to walk back there and show you the laboratory if you'd like to see it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
While you're taking us back there, how deep are these dig sites?
Yeah, so if you've ever driven through north central Texas or even southern Oklahoma, you see the red beds, the red clays, the red colored soils.
Right.
And so those red soils are the Permian soils. Those are the right age for the fossils we dig in. And so, the short answer is that you could toss a rock in Baylor County and you're in the right area to find fossils. And we find fossils right on the surface of the ground. And so you can run around and pick up fossils of Dimetrodon, in this county just on the surface. And so when we find fossils on the surface, that gives us an indication that we should dig deeper. In some places we've dug down, especially in our quarry that we're working right now, almost 12 feet. So we have 12 feet deep of these muds that these animals were preserved in 290 million years ago.
Wow. And are your dig sites like protected now to where not just anyone can come out there?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. In paleontology, especially in commercial paleontology, which is the other side of academic paleontology, which is what we are. There's always a demand for fossils for sale. And the dinosaur age material, T-Rexes and things, that's the really popular thing in pop culture. Thing about the Permian fossils here is that they're so poorly understood, that it's not a big problem for us, for people looking for Permian fossils to sell, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Your question, the sites are very well protected. They are in the middle of nowhere, which is nice about Texas, is there's lots of places you can call middle of nowhere.
True.
So it's very nice to be able to work on an area that has private land, where the owners are very hospitable when it comes to the education and the science of the fossils that we're working with.
Mhm. So did you make it to the lab?
So we are actually walking now through the Animals of Texas room, and so you can see things here. And so I'll have you take one look in here. So this is our African room. So we actually have animals of Africa.
Oh my
And
God.
really fun to tell everyone is that all the animals that you see in this room, the lion and the different gazelles and things like that, all these were in Texas during the last ice age. So 100,000 years ago, we had American lions and American cheetahs and things like that.
Okay.
We had elephants,
I've
blue
heard-
mountains, like that. So, a lot of these animals that you're familiar with in Africa today, they had their relatives right here in Seymour, 100,000 years ago.
Wow.
So we're walking through the live animals exhibit. So I'll have show a couple of our favorite renters here. So we've got a bearded dragon there. So a lot of these lizards have their roots right here in Seymour, 290 million years ago.
My
You look
goodness.
at things like that, they all have relatives, that were here a long, long time ago. Yeah, so when we come into the prep lab, this is what we're really excited about, because it's one of the largest prep labs in the US, essentially that's open to the public, that we can give tours inside the lab. And it's really fun to be able to take a school and teachers and guests into the working lab and show them the fossils that had just come in that day. So it's kind of fun to kind of show folks, the processes of what it takes for a skeleton to go from the ground to the museum to the exhibit. So, essentially this is what a skeleton sometimes looks like when you find it in the ground. It looks like a big puzzle. And so eventually all these pieces will go together and we'll put bones together for the exhibits.
Wow.
So there's a couple other tables that we're working on. So there's an Adaphosaurus skeleton. So Adaphosaurus is that first plant eater. And so those are some of the long sail bones that stick up on his back, and even parts of his spinal column there that are starting to come together. And so these are some of the very first plant eaters on the planet. And this is kind of thing that when a teacher and a students and even the guests come into the museum, they can actually go in here with us and we can let them hold these fossils. And, when you tell somebody that you're holding a 290 million year old reptile, fossil, it changes their lives, hopefully.
Yeah.
It's the kid really.
There was an artist who was a featured artist here last year, and he does these scrimshaw carvings, and he does them on mammoth tusks.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean it was just so cool to think, like what you were saying, just how old these things are. It's fascinating.
Sure. Yeah, and this is kind of the area where a lot of the fossils have come in the last couple of weeks. And so I've got a lot of volunteers that I have actually learning how to clean these fossils and use them for our research. So there's one there of a Dimetrodon's backbone with this sail bone. So you can see the back there. And then that's the long sail bone that sticks up on his back. And so these are all different projects that my volunteers are essentially working on after I bring them into the field.
I saw that on your website, you had this large number of volunteers. I thought, wow, that's amazing. Well, now I know why. That is a super cool thing to do.
That's right. And I'll show you one more skeleton, and this is another Dimetrodon skeleton that we're working on, found by Holly. And so this one's called Michael the Dimetrodon. And so Michael's got some beautiful long sail bones, and right now we're cleaning all the matrix off of them. And eventually this skeleton is going to go on our exhibit wall as well after we've done all the research on it.
Wow, that must just be like literally something new every day to work there.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing that you can go out to your own backyard and dig up fossils, and it's fun when we take the volunteers and the teachers and students out to dig, and when they find a bone from a Dimetrodon, it's fun for us to tell them that they are the very first human being to ever hold this Dimetrodon's bone, and you can just see the wheels working in their mind when you tell them that you know, they're realizing how special it is that they're being able to do something like this, and that it's local, that it's something that's in their own state, you know, down the street from their own home.
I did notice that your trips, that it was limited to 20 students. Is that a space size thing, or just managing, you know, the number of students?
Yeah, it's a space thing, but it's also a really important education aspect too, is when you have smaller groups, you are able to teach a lot better. You're able to work with those students more closely than if you were with a big group. We love having small groups because we can get really personal with them and really work with them on more so on a one-on-one basis in most aspects. So yeah, definitely the numbers is always more, it's important for us for the education aspect of it.
Right. Well, so, you know, I've seen dig sites on movies or a TV show or whatever, and there's, you know, a real technique to finding these artifacts, and with the little brushes and all that. Is that really accurate? Do you have to like teach how to find these?
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, with the pop culture aspect of finding fossils, it might be a little different than what you would expect. But every fossil is something different, and it requires, you know, a different method to extract. But a lot of the tools that we use would be things like small dental picks that we use to very slowly remove rock. We even use things like porcupine quills. So these are African porcupine quills. We use these to prep fossils because they're not hard enough to scratch the fossil, but they're good enough to clean away the dirt around the fossils. So we do use quite a few of the pop culture type tools, the brushes and picks and things. But like I said, each fossil is its own case. So, you know, it requires different methods for every different project.
Right. Do you use like water too while you're out there doing that?
You know, we don't use moistures on the fossils, on the bones, things like that. Typically, moisture will harm the bone. We drink plenty of it though when it gets to 110. So,
right. Yes. Stay hydrated. Number
we,
one.
Types of field adhesives, field glues that we use to preserve some of the bones in the field. Move, and they survive transport from the field to the museum. So there's a lot of different types of tricks and trades that we do have in our back pocket for different situations.
Right. Now, I noticed you guys have a theater at the museum. What kind of movie can you watch?
Yeah, we love doing the theater with our school tours. Typically, when we'll have a school come into the museum, we'll split the school into groups, and we'll give some students into the museum for a tour, and then the other half, or whatever number, will go into the theater, which is right across the street from us in the city hall. It's a beautiful old theater. And they'll watch a documentary or some kind of a film that's related to the fossils and the different types of themes that we've got in the museum. Then so those students will go into the museum, and the other students will go into the theater. And it's a wonderful relationship between the city of Seymour and the museum, that we can offer as much more education as we can.
Right. Wow. It sounds amazing. I also noticed that you guys have an artist who's having an art show there. Is that a regular thing that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So every 3 months we sponsor another artist from the area. The last couple of artists, one was from Abilene and a couple of them are from Wichita Falls. And typically their show will run for about 3 months. And we do it for the artist as well as doing it for the publicity to get folks just to come to the museum.
Right.
So makes proceeds from his artwork, his or her artwork. We don't make any proceeds off of it. It's purely the chance for us to offer different types of exhibits in the museum so that we can reach different demographics. When we start having natural history themed art on the walls, we start to attract the art crowds. You know, it's another demographic that typically we don't see in a natural history museum. So when we start crossing themes like that, it really opens up the museum so that we see all varieties of interests. The art program has been a really wonderful one. The program that we're running right now is going to be up for another 2 months, I think, until June. And it's all themed around different animals in Texas and surrounding areas.
Wow, that's a really interesting aspect. Do you have an art gallery that has art that's always there too?
No, we find really cool ways to show the art throughout the museum. So we don't have a specific room that we put the art in. We different spots around the museum so that folks essentially get to see it as they're seeing the rest of the museum too. And so it makes it kind of a fun mix of art and natural history.
Yes, I can see that. That's a really great idea. I love that. That's pretty fun. We have a big gallery here, and we have a featured artist room in that gallery, but we do have artwork out in the other parts of the museum too. We love exposing, especially kids, to art.
Exactly.
You do draw a crowd, people who are interested in art, but for the school kids to come and get to be exposed to art, I think is just very important. And so I love it that you guys do that. What a creative way to bring the natural history together.
Absolutely.
Your museum's kind of young. I noticed you have like an expansion project. I don't know if that's happening now or if that's kind of a dream kind of thing, but what are you hoping Museum of Natural History to ultimately become?
Yeah, so we're definitely, the nice thing about the museum is that after 8 years, we are really running out of space completely. The walls are about to break because we're putting things everywhere. So careful that we're successful enough that we need more space, especially since the number of education groups are going up, teachers and students. So of course, it is definitely a dream to have more space for the museum. We had another 3,000 or 4,000 square feet a couple of years ago, just essentially right when COVID started. And the cost of materials during COVID just went astronomically. So own it a little bit. And so hopefully in the next year or two, we'll re-tackle that expansion program and add another couple of wings to the museum so that we can incorporate more classrooms and more exhibit space and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So are you guys a 501c3 museum?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we are a free nonprofit. Yeah.
And so how are you funded then?
It's a great question.
This is your chance to tell everyone.
Well, the small museum culture is such a difficult one to keep funded. I mean, just historically, small town museums are one that you really have to fight for to keep open. And that's the way it'll always be. But I do spend 3 months of the year writing grants to different nonprofit foundations around the area. Being in a small rural community that's a great distance from big cities like Dallas and Oklahoma City, it's tougher to get large city grants in small rural areas. So grants that we apply for and are funded every once in a while are the small private foundations in this area. And so that makes things a little bit easier when we do get a few grants, but we also get funding from our general donations, our wonderful gift shop where you can buy great t-shirts.
There's a sale on your t-shirts right now too.
That's right. That's the grants and the gift shop and general donations are our main three funding sources.
I see. So do you have memberships?
We absolutely do. Yeah, we've got different styles of memberships. We've got senior memberships, individual family memberships, and then we've also got benefactor memberships for those that just want to give a little bit more to the museum. And then we also have a lifetime membership for those that just love the museum so much that they want to be a yearly visitor.
Right.
So for a wonderful thing that gets you in the door for free every day of the year, and counts in the gift shop as well.
Yeah. And so, I mean, all this is on your website, but just like, what are your days and hours?
Yeah, we're open 6 days a week, so we're closed on Mondays, so that we can all take a break. You know, it's fun to have a small museum that's so successful, but we only have 2 employees. So we're closed on Mondays, but we're open Tuesday through Sunday. And during the week, it is 10 to 4. And then on Sundays, it is 12 to 4.
My goodness, 2 employees?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. So everyone else that helps you out, they're volunteers.
That's right. Yep, we've got about 5 or 6 volunteers that come every week, and they mostly help out with our school tours and things like that. And then we have a few that work in the lab for helping to do the research and also during school tours and things like that.
Okay.
We've managed to do very well with the short staff and the wonderful volunteers.
Well, I'm just saying, well done, Seymour, Texas, the volunteer situation, keeping your museum going. Because we have school groups here, and it requires a lot of people to handle that. So that is awesome. You must have a great support system there.
Yeah, absolutely. The retirement communities in this area, they have a lot of these folks have found their true second calling there. A lot of my volunteers that work in the fossil prep lab have no science backgrounds. And when they started learning how to prepare fossils, they just fell in love with the atmosphere of digging up fossils and teaching about them. And so a lot of our volunteers really had no museum experience before this, and having the chance to experience something new is a new life experience, that'll stay with them forever, and as well as touch the lives of all those that they interact with.
So what size of a community is Seymour?
We've got about 2,800 residents in Seymour, and we're about 45 minutes from Wichita Falls. So Wichita Falls has a roughly, I think, 100,000, somewhere between 90 and 100,000. So we're the biggest city or town in our county, in Baylor County. And then the next closest big town is Wichita Falls, about 45 minutes or so.
Okay. So you guys we're about an hour north of Wichita Falls. So it'd be a nice little day trip to venture down to Seymour.
Yeah, it's only I would say about an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes from you guys down here. And the museum is, you can easily spend 2 to 3 hours in the museum for all the exhibits that we've got. And we've got some wonderful small restaurants in town that makes it for a good lunch stop or dinner stop as well. And, area, when you're driving through north central Texas, and growing up in a big city in Houston for a while and then moving to a rural community like this, it's a wonderful eye-opening experience to be able to drive in the middle of nowhere, and I really appreciate the peace and quiet that you have in your area.
Oh, right, for sure. And so your volunteers, you have a training program there for them?
Absolutely. I usually spend quite a few weeks with my volunteers, kind of learning what they like and what their skill sets are, and training them in the prep lab and things like that. And a lot of my folks that dig with us in the field, typically they volunteer with us for quite a few months in the prep lab and in the museum before they transition into more field work and things like that. But years in the museum is just, as you mentioned, it's essential for our success, it just makes it a lot more fun for the guests to be able to interact with folks in the museum.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think that you and Holly probably have like the most fun job ever, that you get to go dig around in the dirt and find cool treasures. I mean, what a great job. I career, I guess. And I just love it that this little town has this amazing museum.
We're very lucky to be here, I think, and the community appreciates it. And I think the community understands the educational value of something like this.
Right, 100%. So, I hope that viewers, that you guys are as interested in traveling down to Seymour now as I am, right? I think a road trip is definitely in order here. Chris and Holly, thank you so much for being with us today on Trail Talk. I seriously cannot wait to get down there and visit that place.
Yeah, we really appreciate being able to at least chat with you and share our passion with you. And I always tell folks when I do presentations that they have to give me a limit, because if you don't give me a limit, I'm going to be talking for hours and hours and hours.
Right. Now, so you can do a virtual field trip, which is kind of what you took me on today, right?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We love to do the virtual tours, and we do those do those all over the world, which is wonderful. We can give a tour to folks on the other side of the planet if we can.
Yeah, that is so cool. That's one of the upsides of COVID, in my opinion, is now we can teach to people from wherever. And
absolutely.
yeah, I love that so much. Well, again, thank you all so much for being on Trail Talk today. And when we sign off, we always say happy trails. So you guys ready?
All righty.
Okay, well, we'll see you next time.
Okay.
Happy trails.
Happy trails.
Yeah, I'm still alive. Little technical difficulty here. I'm going to step away and we're going to sign off. Bye, guys.